They have built a fortress around your perception, brick by brick. Today, we hand you the schematic to its hidden gates. Carl Jung, a name whispered with reverence in the halls of psychology, yet the true unsettling depths of his insights, particularly concerning the raw, unvarnished mechanics of female nature, remain obscured, deliberately so. What you've been fed is a sanitized version. The establishment, the societal engineers, they prefer you docile, unseeing. But Jung, in his less publicized works, in his private notes and intimate teachings, laid bare a more primal, a more strategic reality. This isn't about cynicism. It's about piercing the veil. Why the secrecy? Why the careful curation of a great thinker's legacy? Because raw truth, especially about the foundational dynamics between men and women, is a dangerous substance in a world built on comforting illusions. Jung spoke of archetypes, the collective unconscious, the anima and animus. But these concepts were not mere academic curiosities. They were keys to understanding the often unspoken, instinctual drives that shape human interaction, particularly the polarity of the sexes. What the modern narrative conveniently omits is Jung's unblinking gaze into the shadow aspects of these archetypes, the parts they don't want you contemplating, the parts that, once understood, shift the balance of power, of awareness, back to you. They fear an awakened man, one who sees the blueprint, not just the facade. Mainstream psychology will tell you the animus is simply a woman's inner masculine, a quaint, symmetrical counterpart to the male anima. This is a gross, almost negligent, oversimplification. Jung's deeper explorations, hinted at in his more obscure writings and correspondence, paint the animus not just as an internal psychological structure, but as a profound, often unconsciously deployed strategic interface with the world, particularly with men. It's the unseen navigator, the silent arbiter of her deepest judgments and motivations regarding male strength, competence, and utility. Jung observed that the animus, when unintegrated or acting from the shadow, can manifest as rigid opinions, hidden argumentativeness, and a deep-seated, almost impersonal critical faculty that constantly assesses and often unconsciously seeks to test or even undermine perceived male authority or frameworks. Think of it, that sudden, inexplicable shift in mood, that argument that seems to arise from nowhere, that subtle but persistent challenging of your ideas or plans. Jung's work provides a framework. This could be the animus in its raw, untamed form, not a personal failing on your part, but an archetypal dynamic at play, one you've been conditioned to misinterpret as something else entirely, perhaps your own inadequacy. What did Jung truly observe about female selectivity? While the term hypergamy might be modern, the principle is ancient, and Jung's understanding of archetypal drives implicitly acknowledged it. The private teachings, the interpretations that don't make it into university textbooks, suggest that the animus is acutely attuned to signals of status, power, resourcefulness, and genetic fitness. This isn't a conscious, cold calculation in most instances. It's deeper, an archetypal imperative woven into the fabric of the feminine psyche, a survival mechanism honed over millennia. The love and connection so lauded by society often rides atop this powerful, unseen current. Jung knew that the unconscious speaks in symbols and actions, not always in the language of overt declaration. He understood that what is said and what is sought can be two very different things, governed by these deeper, often unacknowledged, archetypal scripts. They don't want you to understand this primal evaluator, because it strips away layers of romantic mystification and reveals a more transactional, or at least a more instinct-driven layer of attraction. A truth that, if widely grasped, would force a radical revaluation of modern relationship narratives. Consider the realm of emotional expression. Jung's framework, when applied with a critical eye, reveals how emotion itself can become a tool, often unconsciously, in the playing out of these archetypal dynamics. The sudden floods of emotion, the accusations of insensitivity, the rapid shifts from warmth to ice. How often have these left men bewildered, reactive, and ultimately on the back foot? Jung's work on the shadow and the animus suggests that what is often perceived as purely spontaneous emotional reaction can, at a deeper level, be linked to the animus's drive to test, to provoke, to gauge reaction, or to subtly assert control within a dynamic. This isn't to say all female emotion is manipulative, far from it. But it is to say that within the Jungian understanding of the unintegrated animus, emotional intensity can serve as a powerful, almost irresistible force to destabilize and disorient, creating an environment where rational discourse becomes impossible, and the man is often maneuvered into a position of apology or concession, regardless of the objective facts. They count on your empathy, your desire to fix and soothe, to be your own undoing. This is a truth they actively conceal, framing any such observation as misogyny, rather than a dispassionate look at psychological mechanics. Jung was deeply concerned with the collective unconscious and its shadow. What happens when these more challenging, brutal aspects of female nature, as illuminated by a deeper Jungian lens, are not only unacknowledged but actively suppressed by societal narratives? The collective shadow grows. Society, in its relentless drive for a sanitized, egalitarian fantasy, has created a space where these primal strategies can operate with even greater impunity. Often cloaked in the language of empowerment or victimhood, the system itself becomes complicit in obscuring these truths. Think of the pervasive narratives in media, in education, in modern discourse. How often are men portrayed as inherently flawed, bumbling, or predatory, while the more complex, sometimes ruthless, strategic undercurrents of female nature are either ignored, romanticized, or celebrated as unambiguous strengths? This isn't accidental, it's the cultivation of ignorance. Jung warned about the dangers of unacknowledged archetypal forces. When an archetype is denied its full spectrum, including its shadow, it doesn't disappear. It simply operates in the dark, often with more destructive potential. And what of the man's anima, his inner feminine? Jung taught that a man's understanding and integration of his anima is crucial for his wholeness. But in a world that denies the harsher truths of the corresponding female animus, a man's anima can become a profound vulnerability. Your empathy, your desire for connection, your romantic ideals, all noble aspects of a developed anima, can be easily targeted and exploited. If you are blind to the more strategic elements you might be facing, they will mirror your ideals, speak the language your anima longs to hear, creating a powerful illusion of unique understanding and compatibility. This is the anima trap. The unawakened man, yearning for that idealized feminine, projects his anima outward, failing to see the often very different, more primal, animus-driven motivations at play behind the performance. Jung's private notes would emphasize the critical need for a man to first understand his own anima, to avoid becoming its puppet, manipulated by external forces that understand its triggers better than he does. This truth is suppressed because an anima-aware man is harder to control, harder to deceive. Let's consider the Great Mother archetype, another cornerstone of Jung's thought. In its positive form, it is nurturing, life-giving. But Jung, in his unflinching honesty, also acknowledged its terrifying, devouring aspect. The mother who consumes, who smothers, who refuses to let go, who subtly undermines the son's independence. How does this translate to modern gender dynamics? Through the lens of these suppressed teachings, the societal pressure for men to be perpetually understanding, endlessly accommodating, to seek constant validation through feminine approval. Could this be a manifestation of the collective succumbing to the shadow of the Great Mother, where deviation from the script, where asserting unapologetic masculine boundaries is met with accusations of toxicity, of being unenlightened? The private teachings would urge you to see beyond the nurturing facade that is often presented, and to recognize when this archetypal power is being used not to foster your strength, but to ensure your compliance, to keep you metaphorically tethered and manageable. So, what is the defense? What is the path through this maze of psychological manipulation and archetypal shadow play? Jung's ultimate answer was always individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of integrating your own shadow, of understanding your anima, and, crucially, of developing a piercingly clear perception of the world, stripped of comforting illusions and societal conditioning. Individuation, in this context, means recognizing these archetypal patterns in yourself and in others, without flinching, without succumbing to emotional blackmail or societal pressure to deny what you see. It means cultivating an inner resilience, a sovereign mind. This is the knowledge they want you to have, because an individuated man is a man who cannot be easily hurted, a man who sees the strings, a man who understands the game. He doesn't seek validation from the very forces that would seek to control him. He defines his own reality, his own values, based on an unvarnished apprehension of the truth, however brutal it may be. Ignoring these Jungian truths, these insights gleaned from the symbolic language of the unconscious and the unvarnished realities of archetypal behavior, comes at a steep price. Your energy, your resources, your very sense of self perpetually vulnerable to dynamics you don't understand and therefore cannot navigate. You become a pawn in a game whose rules have been deliberately hidden from you. The power, however, lies in knowing, not in bitterness, not in resentment, but in a cold, clear, strategic understanding. Jung offered not just a diagnosis, but implicitly a path to self-possession through awareness. To see the archetypal forces at play, to understand the hidden language of the Animus, to recognize the shadow aspects in society's narratives. This is to reclaim your agency. Carl Jung's true legacy is far more radical, far more unsettling than the placid surface presented for public consumption. The brutal diagnosis of female nature, hidden within the nuanced understanding of the animus, the shadow, and the archetypal imperatives, isn't a condemnation, it's an illumination, a stark, necessary light cast upon the often treacherous terrain of human interaction. They have counted on your blindness. They have relied on your adherence to comforting lies. But the door to a deeper understanding is now ajar. The choice to step through, to dissect these truths further, to sharpen your perception, remains yours. The path to true sight is arduous, demanding courage and a relentless commitment to what is real over what is merely convenient. keep seeking. The first step to navigating the wilderness is to acknowledge that you are in it.